The shop is full of new projects, new tools, new hires, and new builds. And today I just want to give you guys a walk around and catch up with everything that's been going on because it has been insane. I have a huge build in here that I'm going to share with you guys in a second. It's a departure from what I normally do, but I think it's going to end up being one of the coolest builds I've ever done. So over the past few weeks, I've been adding some new tools to my collection. I've always been a tool geek, and I've been fortunate enough to meet a gentleman here in town who is slowly winding down his metalworking and fabrication and machining business. I've been able to pick up some of his equipment. So let's take a walk. We're gonna head into my fab room first. This is what I consider my dirty room. This is where all the work, like all the grinding, as much as we can, happens in here. You've seen the tubing bender from Rogue Fab. This has been a massive game changer in quality of bends I can get, in reproducibility, in consistency, in just precision. Massive game changer for bending. But the big one I wanted to show you today was this. This is a 60-year-old piece of industrial equipment. This is a Clausing Colchester lathe. It's from 1968, I believe. And it's been over in my buddy's shop for 40 years. And I purchased this and we put it over here this week. Got three-phase hooked up, and I'm starting to kind of learn the ropes with this. This is one of those pieces of equipment that I've wanted for years. Not because I specifically knew how to use it, but because I knew the potential that something like this has for a shop. When you're fabricating, the ability to make precision parts is just massive, and that's what this is. This is a heavy-duty piece of precision equipment. I can turn things down, I can bore holes, I can drill, I can tap, I can make bolts, I can make spacers, I can make adapters. Pretty much anything you can think of, there's most likely a way that a lathe can be used to make that part. This lathe comes from a gentleman named Bert, who you guys are going to meet in a subsequent video. He's like the Encyclopedia Britannica, or he's like Google for machine tools. I ask him a question and he tells me exactly how it works. And so we're gonna get Bert over here to give me a lesson and show me how to make stuff and give me the runaround. And we're also gonna film all that so you guys can benefit from it too. So very, very excited about this pickup. This is gonna be a game changer for fabrication, for manufacturing, and for just the customization of parts that we want to put into some of the builds we're doing. I also picked up a big, heavy-duty industrial grinder from him. Polishing tube, sharpening steel, taking the edge, taking corners off, buffing things down. It has enough power to turn. It's not going to get bogged down when you feed some tube into it to buff it down. It's meant for that sort of application. And I also picked up a new welder. And I'm not talking about this, I'm actually talking about the guy holding the camera. Show him your face right now, Big John. That's Big John. And John is a just phenomenal welder, fabricator, and he's come on board to help me step up my game and take some of the load off of me when it comes to all the heavy-duty fabrication we do. So he has a TIG welder that he brought in. Hopefully he's going to be showing me how to use it and I can improve my TIG skills. He's shaking his head right now, which is kind of frustrating, but I'll just have to use it when he's not here. But yeah, so the fab room is coming together. We've got more tools coming. I'm going to be picking up from the same person I got the lathe from. He has a mill. I know, it's mind-blowing to me that I'm going to have access to these sort of tools. It's the stuff of dreams, really. So yeah. We got Lieutenant Dan out of here. There'll be a video coming on that. Lieutenant Dan got some new legs. We finished up the rear foreleg, got the shock hoops in, got the shocks, and rolled that out of here so we could bring the device, the lathe in here. But let me show you another piece of equipment over here. This is a big old honking bandsaw. A heavy-duty, 8-foot-long cutting blade. Here, let me bring up the guard so you guys can see this. So we've got this massive blade that routes down and through and up around. This just allows us to do clean cuts. We've got a beautiful guard fence on it, and it just speeds up our workflow. So very, very excited about this. I didn't purchase this. This actually belongs to a friend of mine who just needed a place to store it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll store it for you. You can put it right here. So that's my tool pickups. There's some more stuff out there, but we're gonna leave it for that with this for now, because I've got a big update on some of the projects and builds that have come into the shop. 2011 Silverado Crew Cab. It's got a full Baja Kits Prerunner long travel kit on it. So the front has their long travel A-arms, uppers and lowers. It's got their towers that will hold both the triple bypass and the coil from King. And then, as you're gonna see, very, very few expenses spared on this build. This is an LSX 454 crate motor from GM. This is a 630 horsepower freaking fire breather of a motor that he went with a fast mid-rise ram intake, full fast fuel system. It's got a Holley standalone that we're putting on it, poured and polished aluminum heads. This is a no joke big boy motor that I am super stoked to be working on. That's part of this. I couldn't turn down the opportunity to work on something like this. I mean, it's fantastic equipment. It's the top of the line in everything. It's really gonna stretch me when it comes to my technical skill set and all the various things that go into building something like this, from planning out the plumbing and electrical, to identifying weak points in the frame and suspension geometry, to engine tuning and all of that. So I'm really thrilled to be getting my hands around this. And that's part of the reason I brought on John, is to get this stuff going with me, because it's a two-man job for sure. So let's talk a little bit about what this is. Baja Kits long travel up front. I think we're probably going to get about 18 or 24 inches front travel, but the magic is in the back. This back here, this is a Baja Kits back half. From this tube inboard and this substructure right here, this is what we received. When it showed up on his trailer, there was no rear of the truck. What we have been dedicating our time to for the last couple weeks is mating this rear back half with the remnants of his frame and cab. The only structure we have at this point to tie into it are down here on these frame horns, where the frame was cut and we've been able to tie in with the plate that we reinforced and sleeved. So this is a bomber subunit here. So here's the challenge we have. This is the back half of the frame. This is the link box, the shock mount down to the trailing arm right there. And then the factory frame gets cut right here. But this, everything rides off of that. The shocks mount down here, and their force directly is gonna try and blow that top out. So we're gonna connect down here with 2 tubes or 3 tubes back to the back half. But to do that, we built this little box. So John cut out this plate that fits perfectly on the front with Slayer letters too, so it's extra kick-ass. And then this is just 5x2 square tube, rectangular tube. This is actually a scrap piece of what I built my frame out of.
And then we sleeved it on the inside.
Yeah, the frame over there is the same as this. And then we ran a sleeve on the inside, which is overkill, but I don't think you can have much overkill when you've got 600 horsepower and 36 inches of travel. So the objective here is those two, we got these washers, spacers on either side that are just closing up the tolerances on the inside. And then John, slide that in. That guy keys in right like that, all the way through. And then we're able to throw a bolt all the way all the way through. So this is now bolted down. It's not going to collapse because it's got that insert, and this is a great mounting plate to do all our tubes that tie in. But yeah, dude. And then you can see over on the other side, that one's already bolted. It's not welded. I think we'll probably leave them unwelded until everything's done. This will probably be one of the last points we burn in. But dude, this came out killer. Fun build, man. It's killer to be working with this much good stuff. And then the rest of this is going to be tying into the yet to be developed roll cage. This is all 2-inch tube. This is 4130 chromoly. So you're basically going to have 3 grades of steel that most people build trucks out of. Well, there should be 2, but people build them out of 3. You're going to have 4130. This is the Mac Daddy. When people talk about chromoly, that's 4130 is a grade of chromoly. It refers to the amounts of different elements in the steel, but 4130 is the strongest you're going to find. It's also by far the most expensive. Inside, we're building a roll cage out of DOM, which is drawn over mandrel. So not 4130 in terms of molecular and chemical blend, but a much harder, straighter, stronger steel tubing than mild steel, which is what most people use for everything. It's cheap, it's plentiful, it's easy to get, and you can usually identify it because it will have a seam down the middle of it. So 4130, 2-inch tube for the rear back half, 1 3/4 DOM for the roll cage. So after we lined this up using all of the jacks we had, we're able to identify where we want this to come into the cab. And while it's still getting mocked up, we're super stoked on how it's lined up, because we're gonna turn the whole cage, rear back half, front cage, and frame into one unit. It's just gonna be welded top to bottom. So this is gonna get welded into the C-pillar back here. We're gonna have supports coming off of here, up to the C-pillar through there. That will all tie into the cage, which will get bolted and welded to the frame. Push through the firewall to give you an engine cage around the engine. You're gonna have a absolutely bomber structure. But the challenge right now is, this is where it matters. We've got to make sure that everything is aligned perfectly, everything is level, is coordinating with the other side, because if you screw up here, you're gonna make a lot more work for yourself down the road. So we may be making slow progress, but it's been very methodical and thought out. And honestly, I'm thrilled to be doing a project like this. This is a dream, really. I mean, yeah, pinch me. This is great. Let me show you some of these shocks that we're putting on this thing, though, because that's where the technology just goes haywire. In most shocks, you have one valve rate, meaning that as your shock moves through its stroke, it's just got one valve stack in there that doesn't really change. These bypass tubes allow the shock rate, the effective dampening of the piston and the valves, to change depending on where it is in the travel. So this is what's called a bypass shock. When you hear people talk about bypass, it's referring to these tubes that come out of the main body. So this has, I think it's 7 bypass tubes on there, which is just, it's so much to consider. And then the shock itself, I'm not gonna be able to pull this out right now, am I? No. 1 inch and 16 inches. So based on where the links go on the arms, this is gonna give us close to 3 feet of travel. One shock right here, and this is a King Kong 4.0. One of these shocks goes on each corner, in addition to an entire coil stack that goes next to it. So needless to say, suspension is not an issue on this build. This is gonna be absolutely phenomenal. It's just, I mean, this thing weighs probably, I would guess 60 pounds, 50 pounds, something like that. It is no small thing. And then let me grab one of these coils. Oh, and here's number 2. This will go right up front on the A-arm. And there's gonna be another spring under here, but basically this is just one coil over to handle some of the compression or rebound, and then this guy does the heavy lifting on controlling the suspension of the truck. And let me jump into one last thing on this guy before we move to some other stuff. This is technically a 4-link. You're familiar with a 4-link over on my truck. The difference between this and what we're familiar with when we talk about it, like a rock crawling 4-link, you have trailing arms. So instead of having lower link arms and putting your shocks on the axle, you move your shocks to about the middle of the trailing arm, which maximizes your wheel travel. The other challenge we have with this is a different mindset from what we've been used to building. Rock crawlers it's all about flex. It's all about balance on all 4 wheels. It's all about 4-wheel drive and drivetrain. This is raw power, raw speed. It has a locked rear end, but it's only 2-wheel drive. The way this thing gets through things is with 600 horsepower and a heavy right foot. Now, the challenge that we're gonna embark upon is you have to distribute the weight properly on these. We've got to make sure that most of the weight moves to the back. So a lot of the things that generally go up front in a build, batteries, radiators, that all comes back here to more equally balance the weight. You want the truck, when I'm driving down the street in my Blazer, it's driving straight. I've got a pretty equal weight distribution. A truck like this, you want about a 60-40. You want the truck light in the front, because that's what allows it to eat through those whoops. And when you jump it, it jumps straight. It's not gonna lawn dart. It lands rear end first and really maximizes all the technology and suspension that you put into this rear end. Looking good.
Step by step.
So, needless to say, there's a lot of stuff going on. This thing is going to take quite a bit of time, but there's actually some other stuff lined up too that I'm going to introduce you guys to in subsequent videos. But anyway, thank you guys for spending this time with us. I hope you found this entertaining and informational. Do me a favor. Hit that button down below to subscribe to my channel. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you're working on, what you want to see more of. And we'll be back at you next week. Merricks Garage.